Now to a tragedy at a suburban Atlanta home. Police are investigating after a gunman killed at least 4 people and wounded 2 others Saturday before taking his own life. Police say a man went on a rampage, killing his ex-wife, her new boyfriend, and several kids. Neighbors called 911, then tried to help the victims as best they could before help arrived. Investigators are still trying to sort out what led up to that shooting.
Groups of football fans tried to get into the Air Defence Stadium in Cairo. They've come to watch a Premier League game between Zamalek and ENPPI, but some do not have tickets for the game. Police try to stop them with barricades. When that doesn't work, they fire tear gas. Some people have accused the police of using violence to try to pacify the crowd. The police have denied this. It appears that in the confusion, a stampede occurred and many people died from suffocation.
We need to look at how it was handled tonight. I mean, the way the police dealt with the violence and how Egyptian blood has become so cheap and how our fans being killed so easily over a football match.
Egypt is no stranger to football violence. In 2012, 74 people died following a match in Port Said between the teams of Al Ahly and Al Masry. Al Masry fans stormed the pitch after a 3-1 victory for their team and attacked rival supporters. 21 people were sentenced to death for their part in the violence.
The big question to me at this particular moment is that what lessons can be learned from this particular tragedy? How can this tragedy be prevented in the future? This is not the first time, as you know.
Inside the Air Defence Stadium, there was more fighting as fans spilled onto the pitch. When the match was called off, the Egyptian Prime Minister held an urgent meeting with ministerial colleagues to try to establish what exactly happened. But already the government has decided to postpone the Premier League until further notice. Rob Matheson, Al Jazeera.
Worst of the heavy rain in the west is over this morning. Pacific storms dropped several inches of rain on northern California over the weekend. That caused some flooding and knocked out power around the region. Carter Evans is in Sacramento where the last of the rain is pushing east. Carter, good morning.
Good morning. After historically low amounts of rainfall last month, February has been a very different story in Northern California with 2 powerful storms passing through in just a matter of days. For the second time in 3 days, a powerful Pacific storm dumped heavy rain on Northern California, packing winds up to 50 miles an hour, strong enough to bring down trees.
It's pretty scary. Fence is down, they don't have their yard anymore, but we'll deal with it.
In Sacramento, flood warnings were issued and slick roads were blamed for several violent car wrecks. Some of this weekend's storms created what meteorologists call an atmospheric river, bringing massive amounts of moisture from the Hawaiian Islands to the Pacific Northwest. Now, scientists are getting a chance to study the phenomenon up close. We went along as they flew directly into Sunday's storm. This is essentially a flying weather lab. Scientists use sensors on the plane to take wind and moisture readings. Meteorologists want to learn how these storms form so they can better understand California's drought patterns and better anticipate severe flooding.
Why is it so important that they fly into the atmospheric river to take readings?
Because we need actual observations. The more we know about the structure of the rivers, the more we will be able to make accurate forecasts and anticipate true rainfall amounts.
While any amount of rain helps, it really only makes a dent in this drought right now. The real hope is that these storms will bring snowfall to higher elevations. All that snow in the summer will eventually end up in California's reservoirs. Gail?
This explosion rocked Donetsk on Sunday night, spreading panic through the city. For hours, locals didn't know exactly what had happened. RT's Roman Kosarev is there.
We're used to hearing artillery fire here and explosions on a daily basis, and cannonade is heard throughout the city all the time. But Sunday night was indeed something very special, as a fireball was seen from many areas of Donetsk, and windows in several of the districts have been completely blown out, and the rumble was also heard in nearby towns. The self-proclaimed authorities of the Donetsk People's Republic later confirmed that it was indeed a chemical plant that was hit, but said there was no immediate danger of hazardous chemical materials spreading around the city. Now, while the Ukrainian army spokesperson have refused to confirm or deny that Kiev's forces were involved, the radical right sector leader, who himself is taking part in the fighting, has praised the Ukrainian artillery for a job well done. Now, there's some relief in the fact that there were no civilian casualties after that blast, but NATO, Kiev's, and UN figures put the number of civilian casualties at 5,000 at the moment. However, according to a recent German intelligence report, that number is at 50,000, and that number includes civilians and combatants as well.
Snow and ice storm is causing major problems in the Northeast. It is the third snowstorm in 2 weeks for New England. This morning, Massachusetts is under a snow emergency. Boston has gotten 62 inches of snow this winter, much more than usual. The city could get another 10 inches today and more tomorrow.
So here we go again in Boston. It's been snowing for much of the morning in the Boston area. Jerika Duncan is in downtown Boston, where local officials are once again warning people to stay home. Jerika, good morning.
Good morning. That is definitely the advice a lot of people will be taking. But Boston officials obviously concerned about this new snow on top of what's already accumulated in 2 previous storms. Now, in just over 2 weeks, about 5 feet of snow has fallen in this area. And the governor of Massachusetts says plows across the state have removed enough snow to fill 90 professional football stadiums. Bostonians are waking up to crippling snow and freezing temperatures after back-to-back-to-back storms. For plows, it's become a race against the elements, struggling to keep up with the new mess while trying to clear out the old.
Quite honestly, we're running out of space where to put all the snow that we have in the city of Boston.
This is the third winter storm to batter New England since the end of January, creating record snowfall and dangerous lit conditions. New Hampshire highways were treacherous on Sunday, forcing this school bus off the road. Fortunately, there were no children inside.
This is what it's like living in Boston right now. It's a snow globe.
Massachusetts officials are urging people to stay home again today as more than 350 plows try to control the massive drifts spilling into the streets, burying cars and making it impossible to park. Snow melters are being used to help get rid of the buildup. These machines can turn 400 tons of powder to water in an hour. It's unusual for Boston to have to break out the snow melters like this.
Yeah, pretty unusual, yeah. I mean, last year had a good winter, but it was 2 to 3 inches at a time so we can keep up with it.
The city has already spent its $18 million snow removal budget, but Mayor Marty Walsh says he'll do whatever is necessary to keep Bostonians safe.
My main priority right now is making sure the streets are clear for the residents of our city. On the budget stuff, I'll figure that out.
Fire crews in Colorado Springs fighting this one, 100-acre grass fire near Fort Carson, the latest in a series of small blazes this weekend, fueled by high temperatures and those high winds. 7 News reporter Jacqueline Allen tracking our fire danger tonight. Jacqueline, most people don't think of February as fire season.
No, they don't. But with the kind of weather that we've been having that you guys are talking about, you can actually hear the brittle grass and you can just see how dry it is when you touch it. And with conditions like this, firefighters tell us, unless we get some real moisture, they are gearing up for more grass fires like the ones we saw this weekend. It started with a small grass fire in Weld County.
I actually called 911. It happened so fast.
Diane Patterson watching yesterday as these flames grew to 500 acres in less than 2 hours, taking out barns and buildings, fueled by high winds.
Just a little breeze, and then as soon as that fire started, it felt almost like it made a total wind.
Same story today with this billowing smoke near Fort Carson. A fire starting near the shooting range, getting out of control fast. At South Metro Fire Rescue, wildland firefighters,
they're made out of Nomex so they don't burn.
Gear up for more grass fires.
It's a dormant grass. It's not getting moisture out of the dirt.
Lieutenant Mike DeBoer shows us the dormant grass is more susceptible to wind and drying out faster. But fortunately, what's left of the snow
This here is pretty wet.
stops big fires short. The fire danger statewide is mostly low to moderate. Still, firefighters say recent high temperatures, high winds, and dry weather remind them fire season is all year long.
We go on them in December, we go on them in November, we go on them in February. So anymore, there's not that traditional May through October fire season. That's just strictly in the summertime.
The nature of the war in Syria is changing, and so is the impact it's having on the people. It isn't clear why the government soldiers decided to attack the house of this family in Idlib. Maybe they thought it was a terrorist cell. It was filmed from across the road, to the obvious horror of the neighbours who can't believe what's happening to their friends. You can hear the terror in their voices. Leave the house, please leave the house. And all the time you can hear the gunfire. Increasingly, it seems you don't have to be an opposition fighter to become a target, and the phrase collective punishment is being used over and over. This farmer's fields were apparently flooded by Syrian soldiers who had found him guilty of association with the opposition. This air of vindictiveness is having an effect on the civilian population. Women and children who don't bear arms say they're targets too. I was in the streets and they hit me, said this little boy. It was Assad's men, the Shabiha. The problem's made worse by the change in tactics of the Free Syrian Army. Having accepted defeat in Bab Amr, it seems they're not going to make the same mistake in other places like Idlib. And increasingly they're taking to the hills to prolong the insurgency. But that in turn leaves cities undefended, increasing the danger to their communities.
It's not really safe anymore here for anybody, men, women, or children, because Assad's Shabiha, they target children and even women. They storm into houses without any excuse. They loot things, they humiliate people, detain men, and deal really in a very bad way with women.
So it's not hard to imagine how terrifying it must be for civilians who have no choice but to run, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Still, there are signs of defiance. This school has renamed itself in honour of the uprising. The children are taught that Bashar al-Assad is a murderer. What's happening to them now will stay with them all their lives. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
6:05. Right now we are tracking damage reports from an earthquake that many felt here in San Diego County. The magnitude 4.9 quake was actually centered in Baja California, Mexico, just before 6 last night. Crews are looking into reports of damage and looking for any significant damage as well. No reports of injuries. Some of the shaking was felt in parts of our county as far north as Ramona. The area around Baja has an active fault line, so there's still a chance there could be aftershocks.
Kurdish Peshmerga fighters, alert, watching. Their enemy is close. The commander points out a factory complex only a short distance away. He says ISIS is there. We hear small rounds fly overhead, and Kurdish fighters respond. The exchange is no threat to this fortified position. What the fighters do fear is the darkness of night, fog, mortar rounds, and armoured vehicles converted into massive suicide bombs. They say ISIS makes use of them all. We travel north with Peshmerga, past the ruins of abandoned villages ISIS once controlled, and climb to the top of Mount Zartak. ISIS also held this position, and its commanding view across a wide plain. The fighters point out the towns and villages, factories and roads, all still occupied by ISIS. And in the hazy distance, its greatest prize so far, the city of Mosul. Overhead, that circling aircraft is a constant presence. We hear regular thundering explosions from the direction of Mosul.
It's an airstrike in the distance. They seem to be hitting every few minutes. Is that normal?
He says aircraft have been hitting the area around Mosul very hard for several days. Trenches and defences stretch across the countryside. Kurdish officials call it Phase 1 of their campaign, containing ISIS, stopping its fighters advancing again. Phase 2 will be very difficult, retaking Mosul.
These Peshmerga fighters say they are willing to join any effort to free Mosul from ISIS, but the time frame for that sort of operation really isn't up to them. It comes down to the Iraqi government in Baghdad and its efforts to rebuild, retrain the Iraqi army, the same military force that ran away and abandoned Mosul when ISIS first came charging through this region.
The Peshmerga don't want to take Mosul alone because it's an Arab city and because the Iraqi army has better weapons. As proof, they show us this historic artillery piece.
England.
It's from England?
Yes.
How old?
1941.
It was made in 1941?
Yes.
That's very old.
Made in 1941 in England.
Not surprisingly, ammunition for this relic is hard to source. They have just 20 precious rounds left. From this vantage point, it's easy to see the progress these fighters have made in the battle against ISIS, but also the great challenges still looming on the horizon. Phil Black, CNN, on Mount Zartak in northern Iraq.